Hello, I'm so excited. I am here with Teddy the dog for those watching the video version. But I'm with Gittel, and she is going to share her story living with ankylosing spondylitis. And I'm just really excited to delve into it. You might recognize her name because she has been on a past episode that was actually an Instagram live that I repurposed into an episode. But why don't you go ahead and give a quick introduction to you, like where you live and what is your relationship to arthritis?
Okay, so yeah, my name is Gittel, like Cheryl said. I also go by GT, so I have both of those. I am from Southern California, born and raised in downtown Los Angeles, which a lot of people are like, I didn't even know you existed. And it's like, yeah, we're here for sure. Um, and I have ankylosing spondylitis, which was diagnosed when I was 30, but symptoms started presenting when I was 15. So I've lived with chronic pain since I was 15, so since like 2003.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, what was your, I call it the diagnosis saga
Yep.
because for some people it's a short saga, but for most it's a long saga. So
I,
yeah, let's jump into that.
yeah, I'm like, I feel it. Like, it also depends on age in terms of what the saga looks like, what medications and treatments and stuff were available when they, yeah. So mine, starts when I was 15 with random pain in a classroom. And then later on, if you skip a few years later, and I got it into my head that I really wanted to be healthy. And a friend of mine told me I had a runner's body. And
Oh,
so I was like, running, could be. So I decided to try out for the cross country team.
nice.
And within 2 weeks, I was in unbearable hip pain, and it
Oh,
was really bad. And I didn't even make it to finish conditioning with the cross country team to even be part of the team because the pain was just I couldn't even. I was limping everywhere at this point.
wow.
I went from not doing any exercise to running a mile in like 2 weeks, so that was a lot for my body.
Yeah.
And so now having the vocabulary for it, I can say, oh, I activated a flare back then. But I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea that that's what was happening. All I knew was I was in really bad pain and I had no idea what it was. So I had numerous x-rays done, like countless x-rays done.
Mm.
Nothing ever showed up on x-rays. And then it wasn't until I was a student at UCLA, go Bruins, and I literally walked into the ASH Center, which is our medical center, and demanded an MRI. It's like
Wow.
I have pain. I've had lots of x-rays. We can't figure out what it is. I want to know what it is. I need an MRI. And I don't even remember how I got MRI stuck in my head, but all I knew was like x-rays wasn't showing anything. Obviously, I'm in pain. There's something. And they did the MRI. Oh, and before they even did the MRI, they're like, well, you're in pain. Let's prescribe you physical therapy. And so
Mm,
that I actually started physical therapy is probably my longest relationship because I
yeah.
started that when I was 18. Um, and I started it. I'm still literally Facebook friends with that physical therapist that I started with.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
at UCLA. And I remember uh direct message, I forget what messaging her or whatever, when I
Yeah.
finally got diagnosed, being like, I finally got a diagnosis because she was like for 4 years she was with me trying to figure out what was wrong, like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and like giving me different exercises. But yeah, and
Wait, so was the MRI at age 30 or was that back when you're
the
younger?
MRI was back when I was 18.
Oh, okay. And that didn't show anything?
Well, not at first, and then they did
I
an
see.
MRI with contrast, and the contrast showed that I had a labral tear in my left hip,
Okay,
and they
okay.
were like, you're going to need surgery in order to repair it. um
Okay.
And at that point in time, when I was 18, the technology did not exist yet. So they would have had to do the invasive surgery of like breaking me open and like healing and
Mm,
everything. And I was 18 years old, had just got into college. And I was like, I
yeah.
don't want to do that.
No.
So I was like, well, physical therapy is helping me manage the pain and everything. And then my physical therapist also said it would also be really good to strengthen you up before you do surgery. So we
Yes.
decided to go that route. And because I postponed it at that point in time, by my senior year of college, the technology had advanced that now it was arthroscopic surgery. So
Oh,
they just had to make a little incision,
yeah.
feed in the camera, sew up the labral tear, and that was it. And I thought that was going to be the end of my pain. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh, right now I'm not even tearing up because I remember just like, oh, it's gonna be good. I'm not gonna have this pain anymore, and it'll be a thing of the past. And oh my gosh, then I had to deal with insurance issues because I
Hmm.
graduated from university and I had the insurance through the university, but now my insurance was changing. And at that time, pre-existing conditions were a thing. So I
Oh,
was labeled as having a pre-existing condition, and so complicated. And so my hip, I didn't get to do the physical therapy I was supposed to. And so the pain came back. And I thought it was because I didn't do the correct physical therapy because of the insurance and all of
right.
that. Still
Oh,
had no idea it was because of ankylosing spondylitis.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So all of that is just like the tip of the iceberg of my diagnostic medical saga.
Yeah.
Um, and I literally just did what I was telling myself. I was like, being mindful not to get lost in this story because it's such a long one. This is literally what I did with my students once because they asked me, oh, because I used to be a teacher, seventh
That I
grade
was
middle
gonna
school
make sure to put.
teacher.
I
Yeah,
kept thinking to myself, make sure to get that in there because that's such
me
an
too.
important part of your identity and your personality. Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, and you need to understand why I talk the way I do. Go
Mhm.
ahead and no. But yeah, and one time a student asked me about this, and I just went into this whole diagnostic trauma saga thing, and I was like, I
Oh,
talked for way too long.
I
So
have a 45-minute video on YouTube I made in 2019 when I first started my channel with Arthritis Life. And it is 45 minutes of me sitting on a bench with a little baby Teddy on my lap,
baby,
sitting on my piano bench. Did I say piano bench? And just barfing out my diagnosis story. And mine was only 3 years. So, believe me, yeah, we could spend 45 minutes on
entirely on just the
entirely on
diagnosis. Yeah,
this. Yeah,
yeah.
but it's such important like background to kind of understand. I think so many of us, so many people listening will understand that experience of wishing that what you had or assuming what you had was an acute illness, that it's like a mountain, you overcome the mountain, back the other side, go on to live your life, as opposed to a life altering chronic series of mountains that you'll be up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yep, that is literally so I was a health teacher also in middle
Yeah.
school, and there
Yes.
was a chapter on injuries and acute versus chronic. And I'd always be like, you
Mm.
guys, this is my jam right here. I thought my injury was acute, but it's not. It's chronic. Let's talk about what that means.
That's amazing that you gave, because I do think that like most children grow up with a real like a framework or schema for like acute illnesses. We understand we get an ear infection, take the antibiotics, it gets better, or strep throat, or now COVID, but well, now COVID has two
It
elements,
even
right?
has treatments too. Yeah.
There's but there's also the chronic,
Oh yeah.
long COVID that becomes a chronic illness. But I really don't think we have a lot of like anthropologically speaking, like a lot of like kind of social scripts for understanding chronic. Anyway, but yeah,
Agreed.
you and I are both really good at going on soapboxes. But no, you're
So
you're
much.
telling this pretty linear. I just wanted to make sure I understood where the MRI was. But so
Mhm.
then you went to physical therapy, pain came back, and you're confused now because you're like, but we did the
Mhm.
surgery.
Yeah, I thought it
Yeah.
was gonna be over. Why am I still limping
Yeah.
around? Why did this pain, why did my pain jump to the right hip when I've always had pain in my left hip?
Mm,
And then I was like, oh, it must be because of compensation, because I'm putting too much weight on the one or blah, blah, blah.
right.
None of this knowing, no, you have a chronic condition.
But it technically, I mean, there are some athletes like, cross country runners who could have had that other path, right? Where it was, I mean, you said it perfectly. Sometimes when you injure one hip, you
Mhm.
compensate with the other one, that one gets injured, and then it still is an acute thing that you fix. But
Exactly.
it just wasn't your destiny, unfortunately.
Nope. And then in my 20s, I did Teach for America, and that's how I became a teacher.
Yeah.
And I was in the classroom for 7 years. I call it my Harry Potter 7 years
Nice.
of
Yeah.
teaching. Even though I didn't even I feel like I tripped at the finish line of my seventh year, and those kids will forever, I will always feel like I shortchanged them, because I'm like, you should have had a better year. But anyway, yeah, exactly.
You
I'm not
control
gonna
the controllable. You did what
exactly.
you could.
Exactly. But yeah, and during that time and during college, I always had my seat cushions and accommodations, and I always asked for modifications. And I had, we've talked about this in a meeting before, but I definitely want to talk about it here. Is just, I had no shame. I was unapologetic about these things. Like
Mhm.
um, the seat cushion I got at a raffle at UCLA at my job, and it was one of those like fan bleacher seat cushions, the
Yeah,
ones that you
yeah.
take. But
Mhm.
I literally just took that with me everywhere. Like I was like, why do I just need this for the hard bleachers of a game? No, I need this for my classroom. I used it for
Right.
graduation. I when I go to Disneyland, I would take my seat cushion with me, and everyone would always be like, smart, you have a seat cushion,
Yeah.
I actually felt like good about it, I was like, yeah, I'm smart. I know what I'm doing. Like I'm taking care of myself. They get these suckers on hard surfaces while I have my seat cushion.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Right? And yeah, and even during teaching, like it straight out, I just be, well, I can't do that. Like I'm physically
Mm.
unable to do that. Let's figure out a different way that I could do that. And often it would be like, oh, they would assign a TA to my class, but I would be there for supervisory reasons, like stuff like that. It was always
Mhm.
completely doable.
Mhm.
Um, and as we know, stress really activates a
Mhm.
lot of symptoms, and
Yeah.
teaching is a very stressful
Yeah.
job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like my line before all of this was uh teaching is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've had brain surgery. Oh yeah, because I also had brain surgery.
Oh, yeah,
So
that
many
little
things.
thing.
Yeah, I
Oh
forgot
my
about that
gosh.
one. Yeah, that also happened while I was my senior year of college. I had two major surgeries my senior year of college, so
And
that's
what
fun.
was the brain surgery for?
So the brain was for an arteriovenous malformation, nothing to
Okay.
do with the ankylosing spondylitis that I know of,
Mhm.
or the Crohn's that I know of. Um, but it did answer the question as to why I always had migraines growing up.
Oh, okay.
And it was basically that the blood wasn't flowing through my brain the way that it's supposed to. An artery and a
Oh.
vein were fused. And the
Mhm.
scary part about this is that most times the ABM is found in a autopsy, like
Yeah.
after the fact, and they actually found mine before. And it
Wow.
was because I had a really bad migraine that I tried to do. You develop all your tips and tricks and stuff that you do
Right,
for
right,
yourself.
right.
And so I tried to do all those things and nothing worked. And in fact, it even got worse. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So my mom took
Yeah.
me to the ER right away. And yeah, it was
Oh
intense.
my gosh. I'm
hmm
so glad you got diagnosed with that and
Yeah.
treated.
Yes. But that
That's
definitely was and I overcame it, like the only
right.
thing
I'm a
that,
survivor. And
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. The only thing that I have left over from that is I lost the use of my motor skills on my right side, so I had to learn how to use my left side. So that was another
Ah.
joke I would say in the classroom a lot is Miss Aguilar is ambidextrous, which means I can use both hands but poorly.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so my life was a lot of adapting, a lot of like, okay, this is coming out of left field. Let me try and figure it out. Like I feel like
Mhm.
the quote that you put up, how I told you that I put up a bunch of stuff that you had put up for me.
Yeah.
So the quote that you had used for me said, I had done everything I knew how to do, and I didn't know what to do anymore before I joined your group.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's basically because that's the wall I hit. Like I was like,
Mm.
I've lived with pain since I was 15. I know how to deal with pain. It's getting to a point where I don't know how to deal with it anymore. Like this is
Mhm.
that I got to a point where it was constant, where I was bedridden, where it was a lot and too much, and just any other way that you want to put that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's a rough time. I mean, how else do you say it? Yeah.
yeah, and so it wasn't until I was 30 and I could no longer keep teaching. I had to keep calling out more and more. My principal and supervisors and other people had to keep covering my classes because I had to keep leaving for doctor's appointments.
Mm,
And unfortunately, that was also the year of the content warning for this one, but of the mass shooting in Florida.
oh, right.
And here in California, we had just had the earthquake drills that we do in October, October 10th at 10:10.
Mhm.
And I had told my students that if in a real emergency and they needed to get out of the classroom, they would have to tag along at the back of the sixth grade teacher and leave me behind because I would not be able to
Mm.
limp. Like I had an elevator key. I had to take the elevator. I couldn't take the stairs.
Right, right.
So I was like, no. And they freaked out on me, and they were like, no, no, no. And they started like imagining ways to like carry me out and stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't like where this is going. And then combine that with the mass shooting, and just I became terrified that I would become the reason why like a student, it way
That's
became too much
yeah,
for me to
absolutely.
handle. Yeah. So like talk about like it's hard enough to try to be a disabled professional, but then to add
Yeah.
all of these other things on top of it, it's
Hmm.
so I had to leave teaching but I didn't make it back from spring break, I think. So
What year is that?
2018.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And then so we know what's coming. So
Yeah.
that was in 2018.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I struggle with the same kind of, I think anyone who goes into the helping fields struggles with the same guilt. Like I remember when I'd had two acute health issues on top of my continued postpartum flare up. And I had been working for a couple years after Charlie was born. And in an outpatient pediatric clinic, I got so close to the families I was working with. And I remember when the car accident was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, and actually, little did I know 4 months later, I was going to have a really bad food poisoning thing that was going to set off my gastroparesis again and lead to severe small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, all this stuff, deconditioning, losing weight, just horrible. But I remember I'll never forget like the feeling of guilt I had leaving, even though leaving that job, even though now I can see so clearly that like I could like kind of I could hold it together. Like there was nothing unethical about like me working in the sense of like the children were safe, but it was I was using all of my spoons for that. I had none left for my baby, my toddler, my
Yeah.
husband, anything else. And it just wasn't sustainable. So anyway, sorry,
Oh
I'm
no,
thinking
that
about what
that
you
right
said
there,
about
that's the Sesame Street word right there, sustainable, right? Like
sustainable.
how
Yeah.
can we make these things sustainable? And yeah, when you kind of get to a point where you're like, this isn't sustainable. Like this isn't working.
Yeah.
So I left teaching, I became unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, I was married. So my husband took time off of his work through the Paid Family Leave Act, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
became our mission to just get me a diagnosis, get me some treatments, like figure out something, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, because speaking of weight loss, I am not
Right.
a big person. I am a very small person. And I normally, like my students always they knew of hangry Miss Aguilar, right? They
Yes.
knew that if I was hungry, if I told them, you guys, I haven't had my lunch yet, like you would feel the classroom just kind of shift and get a little straighter and just like, ooh, she's not messing around right now.
Yeah.
Like they knew. I've had students before like take out a banana from their backpack and like offer it to me
Oh my
because they
God.
knew that they would have a better classroom experience if I was,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My classroom, my drawer from my classroom desk was full of food and snacks and stuff. And my students also knew that if they were hungry, they could go in because it just,
Mm-hmm.
how are you? I can't teach while I'm hungry. I can't expect you to learn while you're
Mm-mm.
hungry either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so it was that. And then that year I lost 10 pounds without even trying. That
Mm-hmm.
drawer started becoming dusty because I wouldn't take anything out. I realized I was going full days without eating. And I was like, oh, something's wrong here.
Yeah. A lot of
Yeah,
people don't know that unintended weight loss and appetite loss are symptoms of rheumatic inflammatory conditions like
exactly.
ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, and rheumatoid.
Oh,
It's
let me
really
throw another one at you. Night sweats.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
So that was happening to me too. And I was like, I don't understand what's going on with my body. Like, yeah, I'm used to I'm used to experiencing chronic pain. These things are beyond pain now. These, like, I'm
mm-hmm.
having night sweats. I'm not eating. I've lost my appetite. And I'm a stoner. We haven't even talked about that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
smoke weed all the time. So how am I not hungry? This makes no
Right.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, because of the pain, I had started acupuncture and cupping and stuff. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely got to a point where I tried anything and
Yeah.
everything, right? So I was like,
Go
all
to the
right, let's
kitchen
do that
sink.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I tried that one, and that was actually pretty useful for me, especially because that acupuncturist, I will forever be like, thank you. He was like, I know that you're complaining to me about pain in your hips. At that time, I also had winged scapula and costochondritis. So it was like you're
Mhm.
complaining about pain in your shoulders and your chest. But literally everything is telling me there's something wrong with your stomach. everything.
Interesting. He knew.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I mean, I'm not eating like blah, blah, blah. And I've lost weight and I'm not trying. He's like, yeah, you need to go to a stomach doctor, like figure that out.
Okay.
And so I literally went to my primary care doctor and was like, I want to go to a stomach doctor. I had no idea what they were even called at this point in
Exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I go and they're like, well, and I explained everything. And he's like, oh, you look fine, which, you look fine. I walked in there looking fine and everything. He's like, well, we'll do tests just to like be sure, blah, blah, blah. And then he comes back with, oh, yeah, looks like you have Crohn's disease.
That is
Okay.
so bizarre that a gastroenterologist, I mean, who knows what their intention was when they said you look fine. They might have tried, maybe they were thinking they were being comforting, but like their whole job is to look inside of your body. Like you can't tell from the outside what gastroenterological like condition someone. Anyway,
Exactly.
so Crohn's, which is also an inflammatory condition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was, you were like me, you got a GI diagnosis before your rheumatic disease diagnosis.
But it was kind of simultaneous because like I said, at that time, my husband was like, we are getting to the bottom of this, solution oriented, figuring it out. And so I also I started with the rheumatologist. And that one, he literally just put his thumbs like where the like the top of my buttocks kind of area, like the SI joint kind of thing. And I jumped like a mile in the air and he was like, oh, you have ankylosing spondylitis, like straight out. Like, just like, oh, that's what you have. And I was like, oh, I guess some doctors really can just tell by like one little thing, but sure. And then they did tests and stuff to like confirm it. But yeah, so that's how I got diagnosed.
I'm laughing because I'm like, yeah, that's long. Well, and so what emotionally was the response? Was it like a mixture of a bunch of things?
Oh, yeah, it was validation.
Mm-hmm.
Validation of I knew something was wrong with me. I knew I was having pains for a reason. I like and it was back to the other surgery. It was like I wanted it to be an acute injury and I wanted it to be over and done with, and I knew that it wasn't. So it was definitely one of those, it was a very validating experience to finally have diagnoses. Also having diagnoses allowed me to start paperwork and start like actually having names for things, as opposed to just like a blanket statement of chronic pain. It's like, no, chronic pain due to ankylosing spondylitis, like that carries more weight.
Yes.
And yeah, I was able to start seeing more specialists and actually start a treatment plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's so I think so often people think, oh my gosh, were you so sad? They'll ask me like a question like phrased as if they're assuming that I was so sad when I got my diagnosis. And I'm like, the diagnosis felt like you're in a video game and like that's the magic key to like
to the next level.
Yeah, the next level. Yes. I mean, I didn't realize that wasn't the end of the game, right? The next level was going to have a bunch more challenges, but it was like, no, when you're so invalidated. For me, again, it was only 3 years of struggling without a diagnosis. For you, it was, I mean, you had these little baby diagnoses along the way that then led to, the major diagnoses. Sorry, not to call a hip labral tear a baby diagnosis, but what I mean is a non-chronic diagnosis leading, overall to a chronic. But I think it's just good for awareness for people to understand, like the emotional experience can be very positive in response to a diagnosis, or just very mixed because you're like, okay, this is validating and this is obviously a big deal given that there's always specialists involved in my care now.
Oh yeah, and especially because it's like, oh, now I have a word to Google. I didn't have that before.
In 2018, yeah.
Exactly. And that's, goes back to my thing always of knowledge is power versus ignorance is bliss, and it's like, okay, is this knowledge that I find right now actually going to be empowering to me? Or is it going to be kind of paralyzing? And maybe I should get off of Dr. Google right now,
It's a mixed bag. I know. I sometimes think there was so much more I could have learned if I was diagnosed later than 2003, because the internet was not that big back then. There wasn't even social media other than MySpace, but there was a lot of rabbit holes I was spared going down,
Oh yeah.
but, and then, okay, I don't know if it's possible to like put your treatment journey in a nutshell, because I do want to spend the majority of the time talking about like coping tools, because you are so eloquent with like, not to put pressure on you, but you're very eloquent in my opinion about like talking about the things that have helped you cope and like talking about the emotional ups and downs. But I do always think people want to know like, okay, well, okay, what are the treatments? What are some of the highlights from your treatments? Like what's worked or not worked?
Ooh, okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I actually literally have a note that I've written down of chronic illnesses, what I've learned so far, because I do get these questions from
Oh,
people all the time of just like literally my my own therapist was like, I know someone who was just diagnosed with the same thing. Do you mind sharing some resources? And I asked you, I was like, can I have your website information, everything? And
yes.
I gave her the information. Who knows if you're gonna have a new person in your
Oh, that's awesome. Word of
thing who's
mouth.
related.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I made this and let's see, I made this a while ago. So I know I'm talking about like perma survival mode and stuff like that. I put down terms to know, flair, right? Like that like the
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary that I didn't even have to like talk about things. So flair,
Right.
being a spoonie, like spoon theory,
Yes.
right? Like that opened a
Mm-hmm.
lot of doors.
Mm-hmm.
Ableism, learning about ableism and learning
Yes.
like how, oh my gosh, how internalized it is and how much
Oh,
I turn it on myself. And oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
We talked
toxic positivity is another one that kind of goes hand in hand with that one.
yes, yes.
Mhm.
And we've talked a lot about that in the group. What does toxic positivity mean to you in the context of chronic illness?
So, all right, I'm gonna use a metaphor. And I hope
Mhm.
not to get too lost in it, but I make no promises.
Yeah.
Because so have you heard that thing of like, oh, learning to dance in the rain
Oh
kind of a
yeah.
thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I
So
used
for
to have a
me,
poster in my room that said it was like a bunch of people with umbrellas because I live in Seattle and
mhm,
there's rain coming down and there's one person who took their umbrella down and is looking up and like smiling at the rain and it was like smile at the rain and I loved that. But now
exactly.
there's double
But
edged
but
sword.
now,
Yeah, I mean, I still think I have a mixed vibe about it, right? Because it's not saying pretend that it's not raining, right? It's just saying, hey, can you take a moment to like smile despite the rain? I like that part, but saying,
yes.
hey, you should only live in a state of permanent bliss because things could be worse or, that kind of thing. I don't like. So, anyway, yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah.
that's the part. So for me, I like to say that before I was very steeped in toxic positivity. You see what I did there? Yeah.
Tea.
But because
Tea.
I would force myself to look for the silver linings and everything, and it's like the sun is not shining, right? Like and it keeps raining on me and I'm cursing the storm, and saying like, oh, one day the sun is going to come back and it'll be there and I just need to wait this out. And,
Mm,
like grasping onto that positivity didn't really help, and
mhm.
then turning it into that one of the like, okay, well, I know that the sun is gone for now. I know that it's been raining. Maybe I can learn how to dance in the rain kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But then also the double-edged sword of that other way, so I feel like chronic illness kind of allows us to peek behind the curtain sometimes, And
Yeah.
again, it's that whole knowledge is power versus ignorance is bliss thing where it's like sometimes actually that knowledge is empowering and you're like, oh, it's all an illusion of control, like
Mhm,
one of those
mhm.
things. And then other times it's like, oh, now I feel completely helpless because nothing's in my control, and how am I
Right.
supposed to accept that? And like, oh, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's definitely been a major and a very steep learning curve when it comes to that, and
Mm.
trying to that's another beautiful metaphor that I've learned for balance actually, because it's like trying to figure out the balance, but thinking of balance more as like a dance that sometimes you're
Mhm.
in rhythm for and then sometimes you're not. Sometimes you fall out of rhythm.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel like dancing and sometimes you just want to sit it out. Sometimes you're fine with just
Right.
listening to the music and you don't have to participate, like that kind of thing.
Right. Right.
As opposed to feeling like, no, I always am like on a tightrope and I'm trying to figure out this balance and I can never get off of here. And I have to make sure that my balance is correct for my mental health so that I
Mm.
could be stable and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that is just way too much pressure. And
Right. Right.
maybe it was motivating to me once upon a time when I was able to do it.
Right.
But now that I'm unable to be on that tightrope all the time, and I do need to
Mhm.
take a breath and just sit it out and just not for a little bit and just
Right.
exist, like it's learning how much of those that past mentality that I had is just not beneficial to me anymore. Maybe it was once upon a time, but it's just not anymore.
Yeah, I think when it comes to it really comes down in my mind to privilege. So it's
Mm,
kind of like saying if you were privileged, let's say use the example. I'm going to talk about health privilege in a second, but let's first use the example of financial privilege.
mhm,
If you're privileged, financially privileged, and your parents pay for college, and you got to, your parents paid for everything during your summer break, and you got to do internships, and you worked really, really hard at those things, then it's tempting to say, and then you get a good job and then you make a lot of money and you're like, well, I worked hard. That's what people just need to do is just work hard, versus, okay, yes, that I want to validate that you did. And this, I'm saying this from someone who grew up in a financially privileged, like I'm not talking about like millionaires, but like I'm talking about, if comfortably middle class environment. And, my parents did pay for college, and I see now all those privileges I had. But when people don't see their like invisible privilege sometimes, and they'll say like, well, that person who's not successful, they just need to work harder, not understanding the privileges that allowed the person who's rich now to succeed. So in the sense of health privilege, right, you're like, if you're already healthy,
mhm.
then you're like, I eat well and I exercise and that's why I'm healthy. It's like you get credit and you should feel proud of yourself and happy that you eat well and exercise and you take care of your body. But there's a degree that's outside of your control that's enabling you to sustain that level of health that other people, through no fault of their own, I was so healthy before I got unhealthy. I never
Mhm.
touched illicit drugs or alcohol. I mean, we both joked in the Room to Thrive group, that I'm like the poster child of the DARE program, Dare to Keep Kids Off Drugs in the 80s and 90s. It totally worked for me. I was like, I'm never going to drink alcohol. I'm never going to do drugs. La, 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 la. And I've obviously learned to be a little bit more, nuanced in terms of like understanding that, it's not like if I have one sip of alcohol, I'm not going to like, die. But the point is that, it's easy to think that your positive attitude and your manifesting is the reason things are going well in your life when you have all these invisible privileges that are enabling it. So anyway,
Exactly.
soapbox,
No,
but yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. And I'm about to get on my own right now where I'm like, oh, another metaphor I have that I think you'll really appreciate is steamboats versus sailboats.
Oh, I haven't heard this one. I love it
Yeah, so it's like,
already.
I am a very black and white thinker, so I definitely need to push myself more to be in the grays, but like
Mhm.
allow my black and white right now of like, oh, there are two kinds of people in the world, like sailboats and steamboats, and obviously context matters and everything like that, but just really blanket, really wide black and white thinking.
Mhm.
And basically it's like a steamboat, like, that you're working hard to keep that boat going and everything like that, and that you have ambitions, you have a goal, you have a place that you're going, that kind of thing. Whereas like a sailboat, it depends on the wind, right? And it's like,
Ah,
oh,
yeah.
sometimes it'll take you, sometimes it's not. Like there's a real big practice in patience going on there, and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like people who are steamboats look at sailboats and are like, oh my gosh, you're just like not doing anything, blah, blah, blah. People who are sailboats look at steamboats, are like, oh my gosh, you're just stressing yourself out. You're not enjoying anything, that kind of thing. But it's just like, it's just two different ways of being, like
Mhm.
no one's right, no one's wrong here. It's just like whichever one makes sense for you kind of thing. And for me, I felt like when I was younger and pre-diagnoses, because it's not like I can't say pre being sick because I was always
Right.
sick,
Right. Yeah.
but pre-diagnosis, pre-unemployment, when I was still able to actually push myself to do things, the way that I see it is like I actually was never actually a steamboat. I was a sailboat whose winds always took me in the right direction kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The winds were favorable for you.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
even using that metaphor, it kind of makes sense because I used to have friends that would get really upset at me at like talking about college at UCLA and stuff because it'd be like,
Okay.
oh my gosh, I've been working so hard. I've been studying this information. I've been working on my paper for the past 2 weeks. And you literally just did it this morning and you got a better grade than I did. And it's like,
Mhm.
sorry. paid for a really good private Catholic high school and I've learned how to do these things really well. And, but it's like, no, actually, I mean, yes, part of it is my talent and my hard work, but part of it is just also just having really favorable winds. And it's like now I feel like the winds have stopped being favorable and I'm like learning what it is to be a sailboat. And like all my former steamboat buddies are all the way over there doing their steamboat things, and it's like, I mean, I'm learning how to not be hard on myself for it, and just like accept my reality for what it is and you know like I guess embrace it, even though I've had a really hard time with that word embrace, but I'm starting
Yeah.
to embrace the word embrace.
Yeah, I know. The first step in embracing your life is embracing the word embrace, or it's same with
Yes.
acceptance. It's
Yeah.
accepting even the word acceptance. I think that's what people have a hard time doing is even just approaching the concept of acceptance. But I think when you said embrace, what you can still do and what your abilities are, I think I wanted to circle back to ableism because that is something that we've talked about a lot in the Room to Thrive, support groups and the graduates. We have the post 12-week group, the graduates group that meets continuously and not continuously, but I mean like weekly for longer than 12 weeks. And like, I would love to hear in your words more how did you kind of learn what ableism even is? Because at least I know I never learned what it was in school. And then how has that like affected, how have you learned how to counteract your own internalized ableism?
So when you said that, I was like, oh no, oh yes, I did. I did teach that in school,
Okay.
actually. I
Oh,
used to
good.
do this really fun privilege project, I guess, where I would have the students stay in their seats. I would put the trash can in the front of the room and say, write your name. I would hand out a piece of paper to everybody, write your name on that piece of paper, crumple it up, and then throw it. Whoever makes the basket gets extra credit or something like that. And the people in the front, some students would be like, yeah, all right, cool, easy win, easy score. My favorite students were the ones in the front who would be like, wait, Miss Aguilar, this isn't fair. What about the people in the back? Like the ones who actually,
Yeah.
oh, I love those. And then I had one student in the back who gave me probably the best teachable moment where she just didn't throw her paper at all. And I was
Wow.
like, why didn't you take your shot? She's like, what's the point? I'm not gonna make it. And I was like,
Wow.
"Ooh, that's a big was it okay, good teachable moment. Let's talk about this, all right? And the different aspects of how privilege presents in your life and how it can affect you and like whether you feel ready to take your shot or not, or whether it actually feels
Mhm.
something meaningful or not." And yeah, I remember whenever the students would complain, I would totally do the thing of like, "What? What's not fair? I gave you all the same pieces of paper. That's
Yeah,
equal, is it
yeah,
not? You all have the exact same task. You all just have to shoot the thing into the basket. Like, that's equal. That should be fair.
right.
So we always had this whole thing about privilege and to start with, so that they could get their mentality. It
Yeah,
was called
yeah.
the hook to the listen. That's how I would hook.
Ooh, the hook. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then from there we would talk about how there are different sorts of privilege. And
Mhm.
one of them was we would talk about Western privilege. And I would be
Mhm.
like, hey, haven't you ever noticed that for anyone who believes in Christianity, all of your holidays are lined up with all of their school holidays. I wonder how that happened, But oh, so sad for Jewish teachers and students that their holidays they have to call out.
Right,
They
right.
they have to
Yep.
miss a day of school, a day of instruction. It has to go on, then they have to figure it out on their own. Like that doesn't seem fair just because you're a different religion. And then we would talk
Yep.
about ableism, and I would talk about that and just like you guys. Oh yeah, because I would try to, kill two birds with one stone very often. And
Mhm.
when we would go up the stairs, the kids would like to like play with the banister kind of thing, the railing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I'd be like, you guys, you know what that's for, right? That railing that's there? It's for people like me who have a really hard time going up and downstairs. You've seen me. And I
Mhm.
have to hold on to that rail as I go up because if I fall, it'll be really, really bad. Now imagine after you guys playing around with that gets really loose and I end up falling.
Mm.
And so now I'm like, well, no wonder these students worried about me. We're like, oh my God, what are you saying this out? Because I'm like, look at the things I put in their head. But you know, that so I did teach them explicitly about
Yeah.
ableism. What I was not prepared for was the amount of internalized ableism I would have.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
even just in terms of, well, I talked about having a husband. I no longer have that husband. And so
Mhm.
even just in terms of thinking about like any new relationships, like, oh, do am I dooming them to a one-sided relationship with me? It's
Mhm.
like internalized ableism right there. Excuse me, would I use that language to talk about any of my spoony friends? Would I say that
Yeah.
someone is doomed to be in a relationship with my spoony friend? No. Why am I saying that about
Yeah.
myself?
Right, right. And
You
I
know?
think like I really didn't understand when I started the Room to Thrive, like support groups and the other names I had for it previously. For those who've listened to old episodes, like, wait, what is she talking about? Like the rheumatoid arthritis roadmap, or like I think I was very in the 2020, I called it the beginner's guide. But anyway, I'm interrupting myself. But you know, what has been so powerful, what I hoped would happen, but didn't really anticipate happening to the depth that it did, is this process of just saying those internal thoughts out loud to a group of people who get it. It's like that you didn't even sometimes need the other people in the group to be like, wait, listen to what you just said. Is somebody doomed to be in a relationship with you? Like, do you really feel so poorly about your self-worth? Like the seeing seeing other people's reactions and hearing yourself saying it out loud in and of itself is like an aha moment. Oftentimes it's not even like the people in the group have to give you some long lecture to make you understand it. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Like,
Yeah. And even what I was saying, like, would I say this to any of you guys? It's like
yeah.
back in the day, I didn't have any of you. You were all hypothetical people in my mind of would I
Right.
say this to someone
Right.
else? Versus now it's a
Mhm.
very, no, I actually know you. Like, and it breaks my heart to think about saying the things to y'all that I say to myself, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not okay. That is definitely internalized ableism that I need to work on, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's just, it's so fascinating to me how we can see it in someone else. Like I can tell you, like, oh, you shouldn't. I literally thought when you were saying about how you felt guilty for leaving after your spring break. I'm sorry, I keep coming back to this, but because I really relate to that so hard. And I'm like, you should not feel a shred of guilt, like la la. But then it's like I still feel guilty when I left my job, you know? And it's like, why is it so much easier to support other people than to support ourselves sometimes? I don't know why.
Oh, I need that in a pillow somewhere. Yeah, because it's so
Yeah,
true.
I know. I think it's that we are, I mean, I do think that phrase, we are our own harshest critic, you know, really comes to play. But yeah, so you have like, but I think it's just important to say that internalized ableism is that negative discrimination against your own self for your own health issues and your limitations. And it swirls together with this toxic positivity because there's this, I feel haunted by this idea that I've learned to live with this idea and let it be kind of small in the back of my mind rather than taking over my mind. But it's there, this idea
Hmm.
that if I just tried harder, would I be conquering my health, or would I be feeling better? If there's something I'm missing, am I if I didn't eat as much sugar, you know, if I
Yep.
was just tried harder if I didn't let myself get distracted so much by my social media before bed
Exactly.
and
If I had that one always gets me. If I had
followed my
fallen
sleep.
asleep, yes.
Yeah, the sleep hygiene tips that I teach you in the Room to Thrive course, if I actually followed those, would
Right.
I sleep better? You know?
Yep. Yep.
And it's like um, yeah, in relationship to others, we can see that those are distortions, or they may be true. And we can remind ourselves that, okay, so what? Like maybe you're not perfect.
Hmm.
Who is perfect out there? You know, don't be so hard on yourself.
And
But
with
anyway,
that, well, with that, something else that you've said before, I always think of it whenever I start getting upset, especially in that specific example where it's like, I've done everything right.
Yeah.
Why am I still in pain? Why is this like that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And then in my head, thankfully now I have your voice who
Oh.
says, um, maybe the fact that you did everything right means you're not in as much pain as you would have been. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe you did everything right and that's was able to like actually like manage some of this. Maybe this would have been way worse if you hadn't been
Yes.
doing
Yes.
everything right, you know, because we tend
Right.
to think of it as like a wasted effort. Like, oh, I
I
did
know.
everything right and I'm still in pain. I might as well have eaten that ice cream. And it's like, no, if I had eaten that ice cream on top of all this pain that I'm in right now,
Probably would have been worse.
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I wanted to ask before I move on to other coping tools, because I do know that you have other ones you want to
Ye-
talk about. You mentioned earlier that so I am actually curious about this. I'm sure you've shared this already, and I've kind of forgotten in my brain fog. But so you were diagnosed officially in 2018, and then you joined, like when you joined the group, you were
Mm.
saying it was kind of like a, I don't want to say rock bottom moment, but a moment of like, I don't know what else. Oh yeah, can you tell me more about
I
that?
would call it a rock bottom
Okay,
moment
okay.
for sure. So what happened there was and actually using what you had just said of like saying like this is the stuff I teach. I don't want to be a hypocrite. Why don't I
Yeah, 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 yeah.
literally so because I was a health teacher
Yeah.
and during the mental health unit, almost everything ends with find seek professional help, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
like you know that's yeah, literally the end of like something because I would have my kids do like jigsaw and be like present and like literally at the end of every presentation, find a seek out professional help, find a therapist, you know? And so
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I can't have been teaching this for so long and not find a therapist when I need one, you know? I'm going through a lot of
Yeah.
things right now. And so this was back in 2017, pre leaving the job, but
Mm.
like where
Mhm.
it was starting to really affect me. And so I started therapy with her. And at that moment, I literally would sob through every single
Oh,
session from beginning to end, just crying the entire time. And I want to say within like 3 months, that was no longer the case. And
wow,
I
yeah.
remember, I remember telling my therapist, like, oh my gosh, I'm actually not crying. I think I'm better now. Maybe I don't need therapy.
Oh dear.
And I
Oh,
just looked at
optimism.
her, right? And she just
Wayward
looked at me,
optimism.
and I looked at her, and then I just burst into tears again. And I was like, yeah, okay, maybe not. Maybe I still need this. It's like how many years later, and I'm still seeing her weekly.
That process, those of us who are like the A students go through when we think I literally remember thinking, I'm just going to do this for like 2 months.
Yeah,
Like, I'm just
yeah,
going to
and
learn
then
some
it'll be
tips
fine.
and tips and tricks. And then after like, fast forward a few years, I was like, you're never allowed to move. I'm going to see you the rest of my life. I love you so much.
Exactly. Oh, and especially now with telehealth, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, because my therapist is still in LA. I'm no longer in LA, but I'm like, she's still there, and I still talk to her every single week. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so it was actually speaking of her, it was her, who I was telling her like I've got into my wits end kind of thing. Like I've done everything I know how to do. I'm here in therapy with you. Like I don't know what else to do anymore, you know? And she's the one who
Yeah.
was like, maybe you should find yourself a support group. Like it probably would be extremely
Mm,
beneficial for you to find other people who actually know what you're going through and speak the same language. And I
right.
was like, you know what, that is definitely not a bad idea. Let me look into it. And so that's when I started doing the social media search. And I
Uh,
did find one that was a free one. Um, and it was not my cup of tea. You know
yeah.
me very well. I didn't
Yeah.
say anything during these meetings. Me.
Whoa.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
That
was
is
silent.
red flag. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't think this is the place for me. I don't feel comfortable speaking up when I normally I'm literally the first person to talk. So I kept looking. And I came across, I think, one of your reels. I think you were just dancing or
Oh
something,
my gosh.
but you used probably a Disney song or something.
Oh,
That
probably
to
the
me,
Hercules.
yes,
Yeah.
that to me just like it's speaking languages, right? That spoke my language right there. And I
Yes.
was like,
Yeah.
ooh, and then I clicked and I saw your roadmap and I saw that you had acronyms and room to thrive and how thrive, like each letter had its own, and I was like, she's speaking my language. Like this is it. This is
Yes.
it. So I remember I reached out to you. I did it. I got the roadmap and everything, and I stuff is not my thing. I need a
Yeah,
group.
we need
Like
community. Yeah.
self-paced guiding was not my thing. I tried. I literally I can show you the Google document where I tried to take
Oh,
notes and stuff, and it wasn't happening on its own. And then it fell through though, because I think what group was it
yeah.
gonna be?
It was like, I
Like a
forget what happened.
December. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was like I had to push everything to the spring. And I was so glad because
Yes.
I'm not I haven't always been the best at keeping track of all my emails. I'm working on my organization, but I am haunted also by this idea. Oh my gosh, if Chital hadn't like followed up, because you were like, oh wait, wasn't I? Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like I dropped the ball. And
And that was completely just because of my therapist, who was like,
just
"Hey, what happened with that? I thought you found something that you really like, blah blah blah." I was like, "Yeah, but it fell through. Well, maybe I'll reach out." And I reached out. So
thank
point
goodness it was
point to the
destiny.
therapist. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for
Well,
sure.
therapists either, that's funny because some of them actually discourage because people,
Mhm.
or more likely it's the rheumatologist that sometimes discourages because they're worried about people getting misinformation, which
Oh yeah.
unfortunately is true in some groups. But it does help if you're out there and you're like, well, my therapist or my medical team said be careful or don't do a support group because you're just gonna. I had one person who literally was like, I want to do your group, but then I told my doctor about it and he was like, you shouldn't do that because your disease is just mild at this point and you're going to get freaked out because
That's
there's
the knowledge is power versus
yeah.
ignorance is
And
bliss.
I
Yeah.
was like, well, but this person was like literally like, I'm crying, I'm struggling, like I feel alone. I don't know a single other young person with this. And like, yes, my disease on paper might be mild, but it's affecting my emotions and my life drastically. And so, to me, it's like, I'm just obviously, and I will say that there have been, a very small handful, but there are people who it's not a good fit for them for whatever reason. They realize that it's too big of a group, it's too small of a group, it's too young of a group, it's too old of a group, just that particular group
Too
sometimes.
many women.
Yeah, too many women, not enough women. It's totally fine. I always say like I cannot guarantee that this is the best thing for you. And if you decide that it's not, or they move, or there was one where it's like their diagnosis changed and they really didn't want to spend their time learning about this disease. They wanted to learn about their new disease, which like duh, like I would do that too. So people do leave the group sometimes if
Mhm,
it's not a good
mhm.
fit, and I give them a refund and it's fine. But I always say if you do, if you're not sure, try it. And if it's not a good fit, I'll give you a refund. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
That's me.
that actually would make me feel so much better. Because that's actually how I used to say between the Disneyland ticket versus a Disneyland pass. I was like,
Oh
when I
yeah.
have a Disneyland ticket, I feel the pressure of like, I must do everything in one day, and like make the most of it and make the
Yeah.
best of it and
Yeah.
everything. Whereas when I had a pass, I'd be like, I'd go to Disneyland for a turkey leg, like, oh, I'm gonna have a
Yeah.
turkey leg and
Yeah.
watch the fireworks and that's it. That's okay. I didn't feel that pressure of it. And so if I had that of like, and if you don't like it, you'll get a refund, I'd be like, oh, less pressure. Okay, I like it. I'll try it out.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Hold on one quick second. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And so sorry, I got us off track a little bit, but because I think it's really helpful for people to hear like the personal stories. So like you finally you made your way into the group.
Yes.
And then can you tell people a little bit of your experience in the Room to Thrive group, which I think might have been called the RA Roadmap Plus group at that time,
At that time,
potentially.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think we had an official name yet, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was
TBD
first
name.
and foremost, it was that the one of the experiences that you just said right now of like meeting other people and young
Yeah.
people too, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
because I'm sure that so many people listening have the exact same experience I have of you make friends with old people everywhere you go. Cause
Hmm.
you guys are the ones looking for seats together, you guys are the ones that are like, oh my God, where are the accommodations that they made for, like I once went
Hmm.
to a wedding where it was standing only. And the old people and myself were like, yeah, that's not gonna fly. Like, we didn't even get
Hmm.
chairs.
Wow, I've
But
never went to one of those. Yeah,
oh,
I've never
yeah.
gone to one of those.
And yeah, so to get into the group and just see a bunch of young faces was like,
Mhm.
oh, look at like, because for if you're young and sick, you get a lot of but you're too young to be sick, or
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. And it's like, okay. But when you see other people and you're like, see, none of us are too young to be sick. Like sick doesn't
Right.
discriminate. That's actually another great thing about the group, is like seeing like sick doesn't discriminate. How diverse are we? We're
It
from
is, and it is just for anyone listening, the group, it does tend to be the most common ages are like, 30s to 40s. There's definitely always a handful in their 20s, maybe 20s to 40s, and then there's always a lot of people another handful of people, in the older years, like 60 plus. And so I actually love having an intergenerational group, because there's a wisdom that, I mean, not to stereotype, but there is, in my experience of doing this for the last few years, there's a wisdom that certain people can have after living life for a while, that they can bring, and the nurturing presence that they can bring to the younger people. And then the younger people can bring a different energy to the older people. So it's really great. But yeah, so many people say that in the first meeting, inevitably someone will say, this is my first time talking in real time to someone else with the same diagnosis.
Wow.
And maybe, and it's so powerful, because you might talk to people like asynchronously, comment on their stuff or participate in an Instagram live or something like that, where you're commenting, but the actual interaction, being a live interaction, even though it's virtual, is it's really powerful. So yeah. So sorry. Okay. Back to your story. I keep interjecting. I'm just excited.
Oh, it's totally fine. Totally fine. But yeah, that was actually one of the things. And again, it's like, it's not even, don't apologize for interrupting, because you activate things in my mind where I'm like, oh yes, I did want to talk about
good.
But that reminds me of when we first started and we were trying to figure out, like, we used the school language at first, and we're like the freshmen, the sophomore, the juniors, and the seniors. And that actually helped a lot in terms of the experience that some people are afraid of with support groups, where it's like, that's going to be a lot of knowledge all at once, and I'm going to get overwhelmed, and like, oh my gosh, especially if I'm someone has a severe case and mine is only mild, and like all of that kind of stuff. But when we started doing breakout rooms, remember? And it was like, okay, the people who have been dealing with this for longer, who already have like their ways, like they already have their toolkits, right? Already have like tips and tricks that they like to use, like we could like discuss. And then the people who didn't, it was nice because it felt like we could share our knowledge with the people who didn't have it yet. And then the people who were new to it, and like the freshmen basically, were like, it had a lot more new knowledge, right? Like, oh, new research, new treatments, new, like, oh, have you guys tried this? And I didn't even know that was a thing yet, like that's something that the doctor told you because you just got it, whereas like we've had it forever. And yeah, so that was pretty fantastic.
Yeah. I totally, I still, honestly, I learn things every week. I mean, it's really like, I do have a certain expertise from my background as an occupational therapist and my lived experience as a RA patient, but it's impossible to know everything and stay on top of every trend and every research study. So having that collective wisdom from the group has been so wonderful, for me personally, and the group. And I've just really appreciated, yours and everyone else's presence, and seeing the genuine friendships that have come out of it, I mean, and now, because it's been a couple years, I know some of those friendships have sustained like outside of the group, and it's just, it's very magical. So
it is extremely magical. Like, yeah, when I think about the fact that none of you were in my life a few years ago, it's kind of, wow, that's wild.
Yeah. The people that now we share, memes with each other, like you and I both love the Goofy movie. So like, we'll share like, oh, look at this reel of the Goofy movie, and just connect. Like, it's not, and that's the other thing people don't realize about support groups. It's not just about talking about your illness. It's about connecting as like human beings, and remembering that, we have lives and interests and value outside of our illnesses as well, and validating that for each other.
So much. That was like one of the, I think probably one of my favorite meetings is the one, and it was during the acronym,
the show and tell. Yeah, part. That's under V.
No, the show and tell was great. No, I'm talking about the one where it was oh no, I'm losing it. Hold on.
Oh no.
Because I just started thinking about the show and tell, but no, it was the no, I lost it.
Remembering we're a self outside of our condition. Oh no, I totally jumped ahead.
It's okay.
That's one of my toxic traits, of thinking I read people's minds and interrupting.
But then mine is that then I just go with you, and I'm like, oh, now my brain's over there and I forgot where it was before. But yeah, it was, no, it's gone. It's okay. Maybe, hopefully it'll come back.
Maybe when you listen to the recording, you can put it in the comments on Instagram.
Yeah, like, this is what I was gonna say.
Yeah. But But yeah, we do a show and tell, for the record, for under values and valued activities under the Thrive acronym. And that's always really, really fun. And there's always a lot of artistic people, which it's okay if you're not, but I'm always impressed with people's artsy skills.
Yeah, I remember someone being like, how do you guys have time for so many
I know. Yeah.
hobbies? And if you really thought about it, it was the ones who had been dealing with pain longer that had more hobbies and stuff. Oh, that I just remembered, because one of my favorite ones, and I don't remember which acronym thing it was
Yeah.
under, but it was when we were talking about life hacking. And we were
Yeah.
talking about how we all became like life hackers, and it's like
Yeah.
your creativity muscle really gets like challenged, and you when you're trying to figure out different ways of doing and achieving a
Yes.
task, and like obviously
Yes.
there's always the frustration of like, oh, I used to be able to do this like without even thinking, and now I have to like
Right.
plan out every step, but it's still pretty phenomenal and fantastic that I'm able to plan out every step and figure out a different way of achieving the same or
Yes.
similar goal. So I
Yeah.
remember, but that was one of those examples where it's like, oh, someone who was newly diagnosed was like, how the hell do you guys all have time for hobbies?
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the ones
Yeah.
of us who had had it longer was like, oh, well, you start to learn your good days versus your bad days, and the days you can push yourself versus
Yeah.
the days you
Yeah.
should not push yourself, but like that kind of thing.
Right,
Um,
right. And that's the life hacks are under the tools for pain and fatigue,
There you
just
go.
for those
So that was
people.
the first one. That was
Yeah,
probably one of our
yeah.
first meetings, and that got me where I was like, yeah, we're life hackers. Let's do it.
Yeah, and doing it without shame. That's not something that really surprised me when I shared on social media my life hacks. I was sharing it just for information. People were like, how are you so confident and like happy about using these aids? I'm like, because they help me. Like, I'm confused. Like, why would you not be? And they're like, well, don't you feel embarrassed for using them? And I was like, oh, I don't have that gene. I probably should have the embarrassed gene a little more. But okay, but we
No, wait, don't move it, because that is
okay.
literally back to the seat cushion
Oh
idea that I
yes,
was
yes,
talking about,
yes.
where it's like, yeah, no shame. I'm like, I feel smart for doing this. In fact, people are just, and before I forget, because that's what I wanted to do, I wanted to plug in the Keeping It Real with Arthritis book, right?
Yes.
Because
Okay, I'm
that's
gonna put that in the show
literally
notes. Yeah.
what my section is on page 234, and it's literally about me and my seat cushion, and that's my original seat cushion in the picture, the UCLA one. I think you
Oh,
probably can't see it right now, but
okay.
it's
I'm
there
putting
in the
that
book.
in the show notes. Perfect. Okay. But I do want to talk about another coping tool that, or, thing that helps you improve your quality of life,
Hmm.
which is marijuana. And,
Exactly.
and we do, I have a little bit more time, then I can move my things around a little bit. So I think we can have about 15 more minutes if that works
Okay.
for you.
Hopefully,
Okay.
let's do this. All right, because that's
Perfect.
literally where I have my pain toolkit, and the first thing I have on there is cannabis. The
Okay.
last thing I have on there is my seat cushion. So
Okay.
the
Perfect.
cannabis, so there are so many ways. Speaking of like old versus new, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, now it's so very different. If you thought you knew what the cannabis world was like a few years ago, it is
Yeah.
very different now. And there are just so many kinds of products. There are so many different ways to consume cannabis, which is the phrase that they use a lot now, because you
Mhm.
don't just smoke it, right? Like you can
Right.
also ingest it. You can also use it as a topical. There's just so many ways. For smoking, strains, the ones that help me for pain and pain relief tend to be anything with like OG and Kush in its name, or ACDC.
Mhm.
Those stronger indicas tend to be more like body relaxing, like the way they used to tell you to differentiate between sativa and
Oh yeah.
indica is in the couch, right?
Nice.
And if you're dealing with chronic pain and stuff like that, like in the couch is kind of where you want to be. Like if
Right,
you're able to
right, right.
comfortably be in the couch, even better. So, that's where I use that. I also use cannabis as an appetite stimulant, as I was just saying, that was obviously a
Yeah.
really big thing for me. So for that, I've noticed anything with Girl Scout cookies, or anything with anything edible sounding in the name, tends to be good. Like
Mhm.
lava cake, gelato, anything that's like, oh, I kind of want to eat that, it's probably going
Yeah.
to help you to have the munchies and get your appetite.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Rule of thumb.
Yeah. And then for depression, I've noticed anything with like citrus in its name. So lemon haze or lime haze tend to be some of my
Mm.
favorite, something like orange or that kind of thing. And the reason for this, so this is where the Miss Aguilar comes in. The reason for this is because right up until then, I was talking about cannabinoids, right? Or I'm so sorry. I was talking about strains, right? And those strains are just like the different kinds of cannabis plant, right? It would be like the difference between one kind of rosemary versus another kind of rosemary, like they're still
Right,
rosemary,
right,
but they're different plants,
right, right.
And so that's basically what's happening with cannabis. There are different plants with different variations. Now,
Mhm.
there are 66 known cannabinoids from the last time I've researched this, which was a while ago.
Okay.
Of those 66, the most famous one is THC, which is the psychoactive one.
Right,
So a lot
right.
of people will say like, oh, I want to try cannabis for my pain or for my appetite, for my depression, but I don't want to be high. Then
Mhm.
basically you don't want anything high in THC because that's the thing that
Right.
makes you feel psychoactive high. You want something most likely high in CBD, which is the other most popular cannabinoid that's out there, and which is not federally it's not a Schedule 1 drug, so that's why you see it in a lot more places. You see water with
Okay.
CBD infused at Whole Foods, right?
Right,
Because
right.
CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, and what it does is it lessens inflammation and allows your muscles to relax. So obviously that's really good for chronic pain and
Yeah.
inflammation. And so high-end CBD products tend to be very good for, like I said, chronic pain and inflammation, and for not feeling high, like psychoactively high. But you do want it to have a little bit of THC, just because that's how the reaction happens. Like people
Mhm.
who have tried full CBD products are probably like, oh, it didn't do anything for me, because it
Mhm.
kind of wouldn't. Like, it would need to have just a little bit of THC to react. So like
I see.
I do medical marijuana for my mom as well, who has a lot of problems to
Okay.
deal with as well. And
Mhm.
for her, I normally do like an 18-to-1 ratio, or basically I find like the biggest ratio where it's like the little bit of THC, but
Mhm.
mostly going to be CBD to help her out.
Okay.
Um, and then from there, I can go just a little bit more technical into terpenes, because that's where the real research is starting to happen. And they're
Oh,
realizing
okay.
that it's the terpenes in the plant that really has these effects. So if you notice, I said for depression, I've noticed that citrusy type stuff try to help. That's because the terpene that helps with literally with depression is called, I believe, lineol, Lineol, something like that. It's like a terpene
Okay.
that
Okay.
specifically aids with that. So of course, the strains that have more of that terpene is going to help you with depression. So I'm very excited in terms of like, let's get the research out. Let's find out what's going to really be great. Let's isolate the things that we need, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really exciting. There's so many different ways. My favorite medicinal brands, um, Level is a medicinal brand that I really like literally like Level Up, like Level. They have tablets. So in Mean
Okay.
Girls, in Mean
Yeah.
Girls, when they're talking about Miss Norbury being a drug pusher,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
police is like, has your teacher ever offered you marijuana or tablets or something like that? And then the kid trying to be a smartass goes, what are marijuana tablets? I laugh every single time I take one of them, because I'm like, what are marijuana tablets? Is this like, it's new? It's new technology that did not exist when Mean Girls was there. But anyway, so
Right.
they,
Right.
they have literal pills that you can. So that's what I also got from my mom, because she's not gonna sit there smoking out of the bong the way that I do. Like she just
Right. Right.
wants to take a pill and go.
Right.
So got of that. There are sublinguals that you can literally put underneath your tongue, and it just melts, kind of like, remember those Listerine strips that used to happen?
Yeah, that's what I've tried for
Yeah.
helping sleep.
Yep.
And it's been interesting. I'm still experimenting a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I just want to say I will put in the show notes links to a couple of previous episodes where we had a lot of I put a lot of research,
Oh,
in the
nice.
in
Yeah, because mine is not,
Oh yeah,
mine
no, and
is,
you explained it really, really well because you're a good
yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
And but there also for people who want to look at the research articles, because it is a mind shift for those of us, raised in a generation where, all cannabis was seen as bad, and there really isn't like, a actual like scientific reason that cannabis is any, is worse than, for example, alcohol, which people die of frequently from overdoses. And it's, obviously led to like horrible things like drunk driving accidents and all that. And, people who get mean drunks and all that stuff. So, point being, that's a whole other can of worms to open, but there's increasing recognition in the scientific community of the roles, particularly in pain management. And in a world where, restrictions are increasing to opioids, we need all the tools for pain reduction that we can have. And the Arthritis Foundation, American College of Rheumatology, like well-respected organizations have put out, statements saying, hey, here's some research showing that, and Creaky Joints as well recently did, here's some research showing, these are the benefits potentially of cannabis in pain in particular. But you're right that there's also, and Christina talked about this, Christina Montoya, the arthritis dietitian, talked about this in terms of the appetite stimulation and helping with, anxiety and depression. And there's just a lot of different things.
Yeah, because she has a whole episode literally just about medical cannabis and stuff, right?
When we have an endogenous cannabinoid system in our bodies, like this is not like, it's
not foreign. It's literally, our bodies are literally made to process this plant.
Yeah. You do need to know in your state, in your country, what's legal for sure. Unfortunately, there's some kind of old-fashioned laws around it.
And interactions with other drugs.
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing to tell your medical providers for sure.
So for sure, one that I just read that I was like, oh, no one's told me that, but that's important to know, is that cannabis affects how your body gets anesthesia.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Makes sense, because I took a gummy before going to my dentist so that I could relax and be okay and everything, especially because during COVID, it's like, okay, I'm taking off my mask. Obviously you have to take off your mask in a dentist. Like there's no
right. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to take my gummy so I can be a little bit more relaxed, blah, blah, blah. And he puts the anesthesia in and waits the amount of time. He's like, how does it feel? I was like, I still feel it. He's like, really? So he had to put like double the dose of anesthesia for me to feel it. And I was like, that's interesting. That's never happened to me before. And then I came across this article that was like, cannabis affects anesthesia, and I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah.
There's a lot of little things like that to keep in mind, but it is something that people are really interested in. I think the Arthritis Foundation put something out that 57% of patients or something with arthritis have tried it, which is a lot more than most people think. So unfortunately, I have to, due to a medical appointment for my ear, nose, and throat doctor, I have to start wrapping it up a little bit. But I do want to hear, in terms of the rapid fire questions, do you have any favorite words of wisdom for newly diagnosed patients?
When I read that question and it ended with the word patience, right? And I was like, oh, literally, that's it. Patience. Like the virtue, the value. Yeah, that's it. Like, this is a marathon, not a sprint kind of a thing. And it's just like, you need to be patient more than anything with yourself. And especially when you're dealing with your body doing things that you're not used to it doing, or not doing things that you wish it were doing, that kind of thing. Like, oof, patience is just huge. And especially patience in terms of, like I was saying, you never know what technology is going to change from here until later, so even just the patience between waiting for hopefully a better treatment at some point in time, like the patience is huge.
Oh, 100%. I love that. And do you have a favorite movie or book or show you've watched recently?
You got me with that one. I was like, and then I like latched onto the word recently. I was like, okay, I can do recent. And then I was like, you know what? No, let me do or just meaningful to me in my life.
Yes.
And what's really got that one is Pixar movies. Pixar movies do it. So Inside Out gave me the best, like, to be able to have that, the language once again, to be able to express myself, especially to my therapist, and be like, oh, I feel like sadness is running the show and doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And anger is like, I have anger tied up in a corner. I don't even know how to deal with anger right now, so just like that's been very helpful. Soul, that Pixar movie as well.
I love that movie.
Oh, so good in terms, especially for a spoony perspective of like, what's my purpose? Like, I watched that movie after I had to become unemployed and stop teaching and everything like that. And it's like, especially in America, it's like, what do you do? Like, that's your identity. I'm a teacher. It's like, oh, now I say I'm a forever teacher I'll say I'm a professional patient, because those are the things that I am.
You are. But, you're both of those. Yeah.
And then the third plug for a Pixar movie I'm going to make, I've only seen it once, but it really got me in the feels and I'm excited to see it again, is Lightyear. The Buzz Lightyear movie. And once again, it got me in those spoony feels back in the whole like steamboat versus sailboat kind of thing. It's like feeling like you're in a different place from everybody else. Oof, it got
It
me
was
for those.
good. Yeah, it was. I'd heard bad things. It didn't get a lot of views,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
really liked it. Yeah.
yeah, I did too. So
Um,
those are you asked for one, but I'm doing three. Those are
no,
my
of
top three
course.
Disney Pixar spooning
No, I
movies,
know
because
you and
otherwise, yeah.
I literally have thought like, should I start like a pop culture podcast? Because I love like one of my favorite podcasts is like Pop Culture Happy Hour. And I just love talking about like movies and books and TV and stuff. But anyway, do you have a favorite mantra or inspirational saying?
Yes, I have two.
Okay.
One is one moment at a time,
Mhm.
because they used to tell me one day at a time, and 24 hours was
That's too
way
long.
too long.
Yeah.
And then I even tried just like 1 hour at a time, and that still was too long. So I was like, I actually like moment, because I get to decide what these moments are, whether the moment is waking and baking, or the moment is
Mhm.
reading a chapter, or the moment is taking a shower, whatever that moment is going to be for me, just doing one at a time, and that's really
Okay.
helped me. And then the second one is, my now is not my forever.
I always hear that one in your voice,
Hmm.
honestly, because that's one I learned from you. And I think of that one a lot. My now
Yeah.
is not my forever.
Yeah.
Love it. And then
Because
what's
even though for chronic illness, I mean, technically it is, but in terms of that I'm saying, like, yeah, but you never know what factors are going to be different. You never know how things are going to change. So this now that you are experiencing is not forever. And it works both ways too, in terms of like, this is such a good moment. So enjoy it, because it's not going to be forever, you know?
right, right. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. If it's bad or good. What is something bringing you joy right now?
Angel City Football Club.
Oh,
So yeah, sports season is back. Soccer. Oh, you used to play soccer, Cheryl.
yeah. No, we used to watch the Sounders. Yeah.
Oh,
Seattle
no, but you
Sounders.
watch the men. I'm talking about the
Yeah.
women, man. The women is
Okay.
where it's at. So the National Women's Soccer League just started up again. I got my games starting back a few weeks back, and they go all the way until October.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
I have found that watching sports really is my best way to stay present and in the moment, because it's
Yeah.
really hard to get distracted, because you're watching this happen, especially if it's a good game, right? You're just like, oh, really into it. So my girls, Angel City Football Club, it's our second year. Our inaugural year was last year.
Okay.
I'm like, I feel like such a hipster when I do these kind of things, but I'm like, I was a fan before they even had a logo, I was
That's
just like,
amazing.
yeah. So it's like, really exciting. And yeah, that's for sure. Your team just kicked our team's butt though.
Well, they've
Um,
been going for a while. Yeah.
yeah. And they have
Seattle's a big
Megan
soccer.
Rapinoe in it, or Rapinoe, however you say
Yeah.
her name.
I think you say Rapinoe.
Okay.
Yeah. She's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
She's
So
amazing.
we just lost to you guys 2-0, and I was like,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
but
not too bad.
it was a good game though,
That's a
and I
respectable
enjoyed
score.
watching, and I was present the whole time. So see,
That's
that's
amazing.
why you
Oh,
want to do it.
you got to watch the women's team. Okay.
You
What,
really should. Yeah.
um,
Especially because you know how like men tend to like scream and cry
yeah,
about their
yeah,
fouls, and it's just like, oh my God, let's go. I want to see the game.
yeah, yeah.
Women don't do that.
No, they don't.
No.
No, no,
So love
I love
it.
it.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to live a good life and thrive with rheumatic disease?
I think it means becoming a life hacker,
Yeah.
and just learning how to go with things sometimes, and how to accept them, because that's been the biggest thing for me. Because before, I was not Miss Go with the Flow. I was
Mm,
definitely, you create your own destiny and blah blah blah. And now I'm learning kind of the opposite of that, of like, sometimes you just need to accept things and go with the
yeah.
flow. And like, what is the other one? Like, it's not rejection, it's redirection. And all of those like sound bites of wisdom
I
that you
love that.
get.
It really reminds me of one of the things I say in the group or in the course which I teach is the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. That's a Gloria Steinem quote. And for control freaks, the truth is your life will be better if you can let go of control, but it will first piss you off because control is what is feels comfortable and powerful and positive to us. And so letting go of it feels extremely scary if you're a control freak,
Mhm.
but and annoying, but it will set you free. I promise. And if it doesn't, let me know and I'll amend that statement. And then, okay, lastly, I think we're gonna have to do this again. Where can people find you online?
Oh yeah, okay. I would say the best possible place is through through Instagram. I have a public profile.
Yes.
And my handle is Gittel_GT, which is GITTEL_GT, because it's
Yes.
literally the two names that people might know me as. The
I
the
love
third
it.
name that I technically have, which is my middle name, my family calls me. So
Oh, I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so great. Well, thank you so, so much. I know that people listening will have gotten just so much out of this. And I'm very glad that you came into the group, and it's just been a joy just getting to know you. And you are a forever teacher. You teach people in the group in your participation every week, and you've taught me, and I love you, and goodbye for now.
Okay, goodbye for now. See you soon. Love you so much. Thank you for existing, dude.
No, thank you.